I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, May 2nd, 2018. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with our secretary. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. The first item on our agenda is the selection of Planning Commission chairperson and vice chairperson, and I understand, Sherry, you're going to run this whole process.
We do that after we select our new chair, and then they
The
open.
new chair has to select a person to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
It's crazy.
Do we have
I
any,
have a
do we have any
nomination.
nominations?
Well, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Quillisi to be the new chair.
I'll second that.
And I'd like to nominate Commissioner Nolan to be the new chair.
Okay,
I would nominate Kathy to be co-chair.
May I make a comment?
Say yes.
Well, number one, my term is up very soon, and I know that I have
That's right.
until May 11th to either notify that I'm interested, and then, of course, I'd have to go through the interview process. So right now, I don't think I could be in that position to be a vice chair, could I?
But you could be for a week. And
I
then
could
you
be
could-
for a week.
You
get
could be-
interviewed
you could be
again?
chair until the 24th of May, or whatever the date is.
Okay, well, I just wanted to
Either
be
way.
upfront about that, so,
Well,
okay. Well,
so we have two nominations, one for Jagiello and one for Quillisi. Any other nominations? Oh, who did you nominate?
Nolan.
One's for Nolan.
Nolan.
Nolan for vice chair and Quillisi for chair.
Actually, I nominated Kathy for chair.
Oh, that's true. We have two nominations for chair.
Right.
We're doing chair first, we'll do vice after we do
Alright.
chair. So the nominations are closed. So we have two nominations, one for Quillisi and one for Nolan. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve Steve Quillisi as chair.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I second that.
Okay. Roll call, Jagiello?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Quillisi?
Abstain.
Merck?
Yes.
Nolan?
yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Commissioner Quillisi is our new chair. So then we'll open the nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Commissioner Nolan as vice chair.
I'll second that, yes.
Well, I'll second that.
Doubly seconded.
Any other nominations? Nominations are closed. Do we have a motion to
I'll
So
make,
moved, yeah.
I'll make a motion.
vote?
I'll second it.
And so seconded for Nolan to be vice chair, Jagiello,
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Quillisi?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Nolan?
Abstain.
And Powers?
Yes.
Motion passes, and you guys can trade
All right.
places and name tags.
It's been a great pleasure being the chair.
Thank you, John.
And
Hope everyone
thank you,
enjoys it.
thank you for the year, as well as for the many years before that.
Too many to count, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Maybe, John, you should sit next to me so I could hear you.
All right.
Yes.
And let me grab my bag. Here. Oh, yeah, I'm going over with, your seat. Here.
Yes.
Go.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
John, I think this was yours,
Um,
I think that we got it.
or did you switch them
I
already?
didn't even open it yet, so
Yeah, this is
if
mine.
he did.
Oh, okay. Well,
You're rich in water.
rich in water,
Looks okay.
only place in the valley. Okay,
Okay.
well, thank you, I think. I think John would testify being chair is a mixed bag.
It's actually a wonderful experience. I had a great time. I really did.
You did a great job.
Okay, next we have roll call. Sherry, would you call
Chair
the roll?
Chair Quillisi,
Here?
Vice Chair Nolan,
Here?
Commissioners Jagiello,
Here.
Corbin,
Here.
Merck,
Here.
Powers,
Here.
and one vacancy.
Very good. Okay, and the Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Powers, would you lead us?
Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The next order of business is public communications. The time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. If you want to speak on an agenda item, wait for that item to come up. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Anyone interested in commenting on items other than those on the agenda? All right, then we'll close the public communications. Consent item, we have one consent item tonight. They are to be considered routine by the governing bodies and acted by one motion in the form listed, unless a member of the commission asks for a consent item to be pulled and discussed separately. The consent item, for this evening is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission from April 18th. And the recommendation from staff is to approve as submitted. Does anyone on the commission have changes or corrections to make to the minutes?
I'd be glad to move that we approve the minutes.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Let's take a vote.
Jagiello?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes.
Quillisi?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Very good. All right, next is disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Disclosure by commissioners of site visits. We have one public hearing item tonight, and ex parte contacts for items on the agenda. Commissioner Jagiello?
Visited the site and had no ex parte contact.
I visited the site and had no ex parte contacts.
I also visited the site and had no ex parte contacts.
I visited the site, and I did not have any ex parte contacts.
I visited the site and had no ex parte contacts.
And I visited the site, had no ex parte contacts. Thank you all. Next is our public hearing item, design review permit DRP 1802 for the demolition of an existing single-level, single-family home and construction of a replacement two-level, single-family home with an attached accessory dwelling unit and an attached two-car garage at 110 Fox Street, Assessor's Parcel 02301412120. The general plan, land use designation, and zoning classification of the site is village mixed use. A categorical exemption has been prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and the property owner and applicant is Chad and Ann Carper and their representative Wade Ellison. First, let's hear from staff. Luke?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you have to get used to that title, I guess, and members of the commission. I don't have a lot to add to the description you just gave. I think that covers the project pretty well, is that the project is a demolition of, I believe it's about a 100-year-old small single-story home on Fox Avenue, and it would be replaced with a two-story home that has an attached garage at the rear and an attached, pretty much integrated accessory dwelling unit. The new residence is a little over 1,300 square feet. The second unit is about 580 square feet. Again, since it's 2 stories, it's here for a design review permit. There was, despite the age of the existing structure, there was nothing historically significant about it. Other than that, I believe what's in the staff report and the description is fairly self-explanatory. I believe the applicant is here tonight, though I have not met them. And I'd be happy to answer questions I can, or I'd give the applicant a chance to talk about their project as well.
Okay, before we bring the applicant up, any questions for staff from the commission? Okay, can we hear from the I'm sorry, please, go ahead.
It's very minor, and it doesn't even necessarily affect the project, but I know under the landscaping portion, it says, at the bottom of page 4 of 5, Anyway, it requires that single-family residential projects with landscaping area of greater than 2,500 square feet. And I just had a question. I know, is this project considered a new project because they're taking down the old home and building a new one, or is this considered a renovation? And where I'm going with that is in the Wheelo, it's 2,500 square feet if it's a renovation, and 500 it's new. And I'm always a little curious. I'm always a little confused about.
That's a good question. I've not read the definition.
Okay.
My gut feeling is when you do an actual tear down,
Mhm.
I look at that as a new project.
Okay.
So,
So it'd be 500 square feet. Not that it matters because I know they've got the plan done.
yeah, I mean, this is essentially taking what's on the site, eliminating it, rebuilding. I know it's a small lot. It's a little over 5,000
That was
square
just for
feet.
my reference that I
Yeah.
wanted a little clarity on that.
Yeah, not-
2,500 is over half the lot, yeah.
Yeah, right. And
Right,
it was really more if it
it's-
was new or renovated.
Yeah.
Yeah, not having read the
Definition.
definition, I know like
Yeah.
renovation, demolition, those things seem straightforward, but they can often be really tricky how you
Right.
define them. But
Yeah,
the fact that there's no retention of anything, I
right.
think that's about as much of a new project as you can
New.
get to me.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question for Mr. Conley. Are you comfortable with the vehicle access to the rear there?
Actually, I am, and I think the fact that I know there's like the washer and dryer located in the garage I saw, which somewhat limits the dimension. I'm still not convinced you couldn't get two vehicles, but it largely depends on what you have.
Yep.
If you have a Hummer, you're straining to get one in there. But I think the fact too that it's at the rear and located like it is, that's much less of an issue if this was a front-loaded garage. You're really not going to see, I mean, even if somebody's parked in what operates as the driveway area with that design, I think it's pretty well done, given that you may have a somewhat tighter space in the garage.
I'm just a little concerned about people backing out, turning around, coming down that side access and back in again.
It's tight, and it is it's a small lot. That's
Okay.
no question about that.
I couldn't tell from the drawings that we have how close the back of the garage is to the back of the lot.
It's
Maybe
right on the
here
property
somewhere.
line.
But if you're on the right-hand
It's
side of the
20,
garage
25
and you're
feet.
pulling out and backing toward the back of the lot,
Yeah.
that would seem to be
I
kind
mean,
of
it's
tight.
doable, but it's
Yeah.
just very tight.
Is it 20?
You're certainly going to have to be
Well.
careful negotiating that, getting in and out.
Yeah.
Here's the
Oh, it does
garage.
show here,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
yeah.
the setback, and then here's the driveway. So you'd have to, like John was saying, do that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Well, let's hear from the applicant then, if you would. And please state your name and address for the record. And are you
Hello, I'm
are you
Chad Carper. I'm
currently-
the applicant of the project.
Okay.
The owner of the project. And quick question, wouldn't that be a replacement project if you're taking it down, I'm replacing it instead of new, since there's already a project, a structure there, and I'm taking it back and putting it back, wouldn't that be considered a replacement?
You'd have to
Yeah.
talk to the people that know the law. It feels
Yeah,
like a replacement
honestly, I
to me.
don't know whether that term's even defined. I would approach this as a new project.
Because I
You're
know as
replacing
a
home.
contractor, you know, when we do this for other clients, when we take it out, we're replacing it. So for instance, when you're looking at your school fee taxes, I'm not charged for the school fee taxes that the existing house was there, just whatever the addition of the structure is because of the structure that was already there.
Well, you're certainly not, you're not increasing, you're not building on a vacant lot, but
Right.
I would consider this not a renovation. I would say it's a new project.
Right.
From that context.
Gotcha.
So, because a lot of times I know people will demolish, say, and leave just a remnant to consider it an addition to not trigger certain codes. In this case, it's a rebuilding of it's a new home.
Right.
I think it's a very well-designed home, and the way the second unit's integrated, I think it's really well done, but I would consider it a new project. It's replacing something, but I wouldn't call it a
Okay.
renovation.
Gotcha.
Well, Sherry, how would you do how would you do the permit on that? Would they get credit for the square foot that was existing then?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
All right,
It's a replacement because we don't count it as new
right,
to the county when we're reporting new homes.
sure,
We would report the new ADU.
right, okay.
Is there any portion of the original structure that will still be there when you finish?
No,
So
because
you're
it's,
taking slab and everything
well,
up,
there's,
or
it's.
pier and
it's-
beam and
it's-
everything up?
There is no slab, no foundation, because it's 100 years old, so we have to bring them back up to, bring it up to
Yeah,
code.
okay.
And then driving in, we have a 12-foot access going into the back, so I have plenty to get to the back regarding where the garage is. And in the garage, I have a 2-car garage and then a 2-car parking, so somebody was wondering if there would be a problem backing up, but that should give you more than 20 feet to back your car up, turn around, and come back out.
Is any of that area to the rear of the garage going to be paved, or are you
It's
gonna?
going to be chip seal,
Okay,
so it will be
a permeable, drivable surface.
drive, yeah. And the
Okay.
reason we're doing chip seal, we're trying to get more into more natural and more green than we are with concrete or, something like that.
Okay, I'm sorry, we all kind of jumped in and started
all good.
asking questions instead.
Well, that's what we're
Tell
here
us
for.
about the project.
Well, we've had the project since 2006. My wife and I have been here all our lives, and we got the idea when we bought the property. I went to Ojai Elementary, which is across the street, way back in the 60s, and I thought, I'd like to build something.
So did my wife.
I recognize her, no. But we wanted something like, across from us is the Need, which is a beautiful building, so we wanted to stay with an old Spanish, old world style, thing, so we got that idea, of staying something really unique, since it's right in downtown. So that's how we came up with the idea of the structure.
Okay, and you're going to have a rentable accessory dwelling unit as a part of the structure then?
Well, if everything goes good, we'll rent the bigger part, and the single construction, where the single room is we want to retire and plan on traveling. If we
Oh,
don't travel, we'll
okay.
come back and have a place to stay. That's, if everything goes well.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? Ray, please go ahead.
It's a beautiful design.
Thank you.
By now, anyone that has watched the Planning Commission kind of knows I'm always interested in what kind of natural building or green amenities are being added. I heard you mention permeable surfaces for the driveway, I think a moment
Yes.
ago. Any plans for rain catchment off the roof or solar panels or
I
anything like
don't
that?
know, I was, because we're not in plan check yet, I don't know what's required.
Oh, none
So
of that's
we'll-
required, so I'm just kind of taking a temperature gauge of where you're
Basically,
at with all of that.
I think when you say catching like the runoff and stuff like that.
Rain barrels or downspouts being pointed into
Oh, we definitely
the
have downspouts.
landscape,
Going into, to the landscape and.
keeping the
where-
water on the property.
As much as we can, yes.
Yeah, things like that, yeah.
So we do have downspouts in all corners,
Mhm.
going totally to most of, the front of the landscape, so we can, use that water for the landscaping. In the
Mhm.
back, with the way the percentage is coming off the backside, I don't know how that's gonna work,
Mhm.
getting to the front without,
And is there gray water gonna be coming off the washer in the garage?
No, I wasn't planning on doing any gray water.
That's pretty simple, especially if it's in the garage.
Well, it's not really, it's that simple. There's a lot of different underground,
Yeah, you have to build a French drain for the gray water.
well, and, there's requirements that the city likes, or even more
Right.
the county,
No?
on making that right with the gray water, because it's just, not just, you have to make sure that you have it stored right, if you have gray water for, the.
Commissioner Nolan knows more about that. I mean, there isn't any permits required, right, for
There's
that?
3 types of the gray water
Yeah,
systems.
that-
There's a laundry to landscape, and there's no permit required. So that would just be like from your washing machine.
Mhm.
And there's some basic details that are available on the county. I think we have a link on the city one, possibly to the counties. You have to use biocompatible,
Soaps.
laundry products.
Yeah,
But the water goes out into the landscape. It's not stored, it's not pumped. So you could direct it, like say if you had a tree or you had some shrubs or hedging material, essentially you could water that with that gray water.
all the gray water, so you wouldn't have to
That's-
store it if you had a lot of laundry, for instance,
Well,
like the smell of the
So whenever,
stinky water.
the laundry to landscape you can't store and there's no permit. Then the second one is a simple system, which presently does require a permit. It's not that expensive, but it's a series of ball valves that you would install in your plumbing with essentially like a diverter. So the water could go to the sewer. If you turned it, it can go to the gray water. And in that system, you can't store it either. It's going to basically go out into the landscape. And there's
So it'll always be moist if you're using the washer and dryer a lot, or the washing machine a lot. There'll be a lot of moisture out there, even if you have the rain. For instance, if we have sprinklers on anyway for the plants, and we're all
Right.
going drought resistant.
But you could, if you wanted to, if you decided you wanted to do that, you would maybe not need sprinklers in that area. Let's say if you had a nice tree on your property or a portion of shrubs.
Right.
And then the third one, if you decided you wanted to store it, pump it and filter it, that's more expensive, and that does require more permitting, and of course, because now you're buying a tank, a filter, a pump,
Right.
and,
Which I don't think we have the room for a
right,
a
so
tank.
the two low-hanging fruit is obviously the laundry to landscape, and then the second one is the simple system, which you can now use your laundry, your washing machine, and you can do your showers, tubs, and sinks, not excluding the kitchen sink.
But it would be under a separate line on your plumbing, so you'd have two different lines coming in.
No, you have the same system, and it's a matter of like a diverter on your regular plumbing system, so that water would go now outside rather than into the sewer. At some point, if you want it, you can turn it and let it go into the sewer if you wanted to.
Okay.
But
So-
you have to have a different diverter valve basically for each fixture.
Well, you
Depending on
no,
what
you
your
would,
plumbing's
you
like.
wouldn't, you would
You wouldn't
plumb it
necessarily.
separately. You would have a gray water drain system and a black water.
So you wouldn't have a
drain
separate
system.
line because of,
But you
You'd have
tie-
you'd have a separate line to those
Yeah.
units, because, and
You'd
then
have to have a separate line,
the
yes.
valve is closest to the, where it exits the building, and that's where your diverter valve
Mhm.
is.
Yes, so basically, it's your regular plumbing, and then the
Yeah.
diverter is closer to the exit.
no,
but the
it's-
separate
it's-
line
Well,
though.
it can be that way.
Yeah, not necessarily, because
Well,
it
it can
depends.
be.
If you go to, well, because the stack, if it's connected to the toilet, you can't just divert
But
that.
we're not talking about using the toilet. You can't use
No,
black
I know,
water.
but in plumbing,
Right,
when the way they plumb a house,
right.
they'll connect all those fixtures onto one trunk.
Exactly.
And that trunk will come, down and out. Even if you can't put a diverter
You
valve.
can't put a
Right, 'cause you're
diverter valve on
separating
You
out
that.
have to
the-
separate.
the black
You do
water.
have to do some
Yeah,
extra
the
valve-
PVC
so there
work.
is-
But it's not-
Or ABS
Yeah.
work to, kind
Separate
of
'em.
separate that out.
But it's not that
Right,
complicated, even though
it isn't, but
Yeah,
it does
but it's-
require a little
The
bit of.
valves are right next to the
You're right.
washer, and it's either sewer or
Flipping it, so-
landscape.
Yeah, okay.
And we're
That
just, we're
simple.
just letting you know.
And there are
because-
no requirements. I always bring it up, one, to educate people that are here that may not know about it, and two, just to kind of, if there's a remodel or a new building being built, I love to see new examples for the community to
Sure.
know that's happened,
Yeah.
so they,
So would that be a separate permit from the house too, since I'm doing two different lines coming out of the house? 'Cause they are two different lines. You got a gray water line, you got your sewer line. You're gonna have to have,
No.
The gray water, if you do this simple, I think you do have to pull a separate, well, maybe not.
I don't
Maybe
think
it's
so.
only if you
Sounds
go
like
onto an
in the county you
existing
do,
one.
once inside the
No, a
county,
simple
they make
line
you do
right
it.
off your washer is,
It's in the building
some
code
people
too,
just
the
even
plumbing
take
code.
a hose off the back, but
No.
to be safe, so you don't have too much moisture.
And you're okay with the gray water
Bulk.
submerged on the ground with bugs and mosquitoes and stuff like that?
No, because if you use a good biodegradable soap like Oasis, a plug for Oasis, which is what I use, it's really plant food when it
Oh.
mixes with water. It's super highly concentrated, and it's just minerals, and it cleans your clothes. And it's not like Tide or something
Right.
like that. It's pure plant food and nutrient.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are
Well, I
deep-
definitely,
yeah.
definitely would be interested in
Should let
looking
them know.
at something like that,
Yeah.
just because.
Art Ludwig developed Oasis. He doesn't own the company anymore, but he's a gray water expert and designer, and he developed this laundry. But there's other ones as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just, again, there's no requirements, there's no regulations. We're still talking, having our water-wise conversations, which is part of tonight's agenda again. But I'm always just asking what's happening in terms of green and natural
Sure.
building and conservation in terms of water and energy, and keeping as much water on your property as possible through ponds or swales or however that might work. I'm also curious about, because it's an old building, sometimes when old buildings are taken down, and I'm certainly no expert, Chester would know more than I, if there's any, just my own curiosity, if there's any old materials from the original house, windows or lumber that you plan on using, because.
Well, I'm going to definitely use the material because
vintage.
in '06, we remodeled a little bit, and we have the original fir, the 2x4 size fir that is in great shape. So I'm going to use that for maybe lintels inside and trim and stuff, because I definitely believe in anything I can save, I use. The windows, they're single glazed, they're not worth saving.
Okay.
You know, the new ones are going to be dual glazed, tempered, fireproof, stuff like that.
Right.
But the block I can't save because it's, you know, it's unsalvageable, but definitely the wood for the joists and the rafters I'm going to use for something, or for another project later on down the road.
Great. That's all, thank you.
Regarding the gray order, if you are interested, go onto the Ventura County website. I think the city of Ojai, I believe, has a link to that. But they have details, and they'll show you how to
Okay.
do it, basically, on the different options. And then also when you, if you're not going to do the storage option, which is the standard system, it'll show you how to do the detail when the pipe exits and goes into the landscape. So it has to be buried, and there's mulch. It's not complicated,
But
it's
is
all
there a
on
separate
there.
permit with that regarding the other instance it is?
You know, I'm not positive. It might be the same permit, and only a permit's required when you're doing it on
I had to pull one
existing.
myself, so.
We did it on an existing project, so, and we had to pull a permit for it. But they, you know, I'm sure if you
It
contact
should
the
be just
city,
part, it's
they'll be able
probably
to.
part of the, if he's getting a permit
Yeah.
to build a new house, it'd probably be just part of that
Part of the
permit.
regular,
Yeah.
your
And
plumbing
I
permit.
can't imagine it being a separate
I
permit.
don't think so either, because it's new,
Yeah.
Right.
doing new. But all the information is on there, and I would, you know, just take a look
Sure.
at it and see if
Yeah.
if it works for you.
Sure.
Yes.
Just a couple other things I want to mention. And I just learned this at the Ojai Earth Day, is the rebates for solar from federal and I think state too are ending in 2020 for some reason. So there's if you're planning on doing solar, the rebates are going to be running out fairly quick. So if you plan on doing it, look into that because there's still a 30% rebate
Okay.
or something like that. What was the other? What Chester was talking about last meeting with the on-demand water
Recirculation.
heater and recirculation.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And just to mention on that, we learned a lot from Chester regarding the recirculation, which
Yeah.
I didn't know about.
That's a nice setup, yeah.
Yeah.
As far as the gray water, it sounds to me like the laundry to landscape is not only the simplest, but it might make the overall plumbing simpler. If the washer's out in
Yeah,
the
it does.
garage
It does.
and you run it directly outside, you don't have to plumb back into the rest of the system in the house.
Yeah.
But we are talking about how you're building the house. We're not talking about zoning and land use here,
All right.
which is what we're supposed to be here talking about.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I'm always guilty of straying that line, I know.
I think I'm good.
Commissioner Corbin?
I think it looks great. Can't wait to start.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nolan? Oh, excuse me, Vice Chair Nolan?
I was going to see if we're ready to make a motion.
Yeah. Why don't you make a motion?
I will.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah, I think we're ready for a motion.
Okay.
That's true.
Any other speakers out there on this item? We don't have any cards. I think we're through, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, then we'll close the public hearing. Any more discussion by the commission? Then could we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Oh, you want to make a motion? Go ahead. Go ahead.
ahead.
Okay, I make a motion to approve design review permit DRP 18-02 for the demolition of a one-story residence and construction of a two-level home with an attached accessory dwelling unit and attached two-car garage at the 110 Fox Street address.
Second?
I will second the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Then let's have a vote, Sherry.
Jagiello,
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes?
Quillisi?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Congratulations, you have your design review permit. All right, let's see what is next here on the agenda.
Chair, could I mention something really quick? That I've
Certainly.
done so in the past. In the past, I made a suggestion and a request that we not print these giant blueprints any longer. And then someone even brought up that some planning commissions are given iPads by the city and they're not using paper at all anymore. And then the conversation got dropped because we were talking about, well, is there recycled paper to print everything on, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm pretty diligent and vigilant about that subject. That's all I have to say.
Okay, I find that while the small sheets that are usually a part of each tabbed exhibit in our booklets are good for most purposes, sometimes this is the only thing that has readable detail on it. I agree that we'd be better off if we could do it all electronically, but an iPad screen is even smaller than this. So, yeah, at any rate, something to think about. But I suspect the city would rather print these than buy iPads for everybody at the Planning Commission. But it's a topic that the city council may wish to take up. Yeah. Okay, discussion item number 4, discussion of potential water-wise development standards and options for development standards intended to promote water conservation. And I want to take just a moment, I did this previously, but I wanted to thank Mr. Connolly for writing this up in such a way that our ramblings of the last meeting sounded organized. And I think that was quite a feat, actually. But I compliment you on your writing and on your ability to organize the topic. And now, let's hear from staff on water-wise.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd say I was impressed through 2 meetings just how much information all of you had out there, which is good. I mean, it wasn't like it was 1 or 2 ideas. There was a lot. And I guess that's what, in a lot of ways, makes it difficult is how do you prioritize and organize and package it? And I just tried to do that in playing an editor and based on what I'd heard and going through the notes, get it into some kind of shape that I think could go to the city council and ultimately have action taken on it. So don't have anything new to say. I hope it's condensed and organized well, because I know the goal is to get it before the city council so we can get this forwarded and get the city moving on some of these items, which
Right.
take a lot of different forms, actually, from education into the regulatory sphere to working with other agencies. So there's a lot there, obviously.
But yeah, it looks very well organized to me. I'm sure there are other things that we can bring up as we go, but my feeling is this is a great start to the discussion and a worthy recommendation to the city council. Any other comments from the commission? Yes, sir, Mr. Powers.
I just had a question for Luke. In reviewing the minutes from last meeting where Vice Chair, then Commissioner Nolan, spoke about low, medium, and long-range, short-range goals, et cetera. And then the language I'm seeing on your staff report is you're using high priority, medium priority. Is that synonymous and low priority? Is that synonymous to the low, medium, long range, short range? Some of the things like the landscaping that Vice Chair Nolan mentioned as low hanging fruit is now in medium priority. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the way you organized it in your mind, what went and where.
I was trying to organize it for high priority with things that could probably be done more quickly with less expense.
Okay, so was it time?
More time-wise,
So
correct.
okay.
Not necessarily more important than one or the other.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good clarification. So in terms of the words, maybe it's more medium term, though I kind of hesitated to put actual time on there. There we go. Maybe
Oh,
it just needed to
yes.
get off and on again. But that was more what I meant, was kind of, I think, is the discussion when a lot of things fell more easily into the education effort and outreach effort to sort of get an awareness of this before we plunged into the regulatory area. Because
Yeah.
even simple regulatory changes or developing guidelines, it takes some time.
Yeah.
And may take additional expense if we have to get other people on board to do it. But that was really the intent, and again, this is meant to hopefully, we want to edit the terms or rank that.
Well,
you know,
you're
feel
talking
free.
importance versus urgency, perhaps, where priority maybe tends toward the urgency. Something could be done in the short term.
Could more easily be done and is probably the best starting point. I think, again, as a lot of things were shared, the discussion seemed to be on getting information out to people, whether that was existing information like links to existing sites or things like the circulation system inside the on-demand water heaters. That sort of thing of getting that awareness out there seemed to be the real low-hanging fruit and more easily done with staff that we have. It's more just allocating time and doing it, versus some of these other things that are probably equally noteworthy. Like I think the discussion about essentially having swales at the front edge of homes, because, Ojai has a lot of that where sort of it's not a clear distinction between private and public on a lot of the streets, that letting homeowners know that could even be an option. So I wouldn't say that's a lower priority, but it's, other than informing people initially, I think it's harder to develop guidelines on that. That would be sort of a second step, is how I saw it.
Okay, yes.
I might add that the city of Ventura has the curb cut program, and they have a detail, and I've been kind of working on this for a couple of years because they've had it for a couple of years, and basically they said, the city of Ojai can use it as a template. I think I even have it if you want me to send it to you. But there's one thing I wanted to share, and it actually is under the low priority items, and it's the first one about Title 12. And personally, when I have done landscape projects, as a landscape architect, before the project's going to get signed off, I look around and I go, God, I hope the contractor followed the plans, because a lot of times the client, property owner, doesn't want me to do project management or construction administration. Usually it's a cost issue. So I don't really know, and I usually have the contractor sign it off. I don't, because I don't, and sometimes I can see things that they've done that isn't according to the plans. So, that was an issue for me. And then sure enough, I was going, wouldn't it be great if we had a checklist that when the building inspector is doing the final walkthrough, because they're technically supposed to be looking at some landscape issues, if there was some further documentation. So sure enough, I had a project at the county, and the county has exactly the thing that I was dreaming of, or that I wanted. And I would like to share it, and I would hope that the city would consider adopting it. But basically what it is, it's the applicant's landscape consultant's checklist and certificate of compliance, so they made it a little more stringent. But basically, how does this tie in with water? Well, it all has to do with water. It's the planting and the irrigation and the soil preparation. But are the plants planted properly? Are they properly staked? Or root control boxes used? Is the soil amended correctly according to the soils report, which is required? Invoices attached. I think that's super important, because like I said, I've been on so many projects where I find out later that the contractor didn't follow the plans. So they're not doing what is supposed to be required with the modified water efficient landscape ordinance, which is all about water conservation. And is the irrigation installed and designed and adjusted? The as-built, that's part of the MWEL already. Same with the plans, and then of course the backflow prevention, which is already required by the state or the county. But there's a couple items in there that I think are crucial to further enhancing stormwater capture, the viability of the plant material and how much irrigation you're using. And most of it has to do with the soil preparation. But there's the documentation asking the contractor to include the invoices so that you know that they followed the soils report that's required and the documentation on the plan. So anyway,
If you have a template for staff, that
I
would be
do, and I can even give this
a
to you.
gift.
But to me, if we're going to, comply and we have to abide by the WELO, this makes a lot of sense, so.
Great.
My 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you very much. Comments or questions for staff by the rest of the commission?
On page 2 of 6 of the meetings from April 18th, there's proposed some thoughts on the following. Ask the question.
2 of 6 where? I'm sorry.
2 of 6 of the minutes from April 18th,
Oh,
from the
okay.
last meeting.
Mhm.
There's a little section under the low-hanging fruit, propose some thoughts on the following. Ask the question, do we want to eliminate lawns? Do we want to restrict lawns to be low or moderate water usage? Is there a moratorium to cut out high water use plant material, eliminate swimming pools and spas, or require swimming pools and spas to be covered? So I'm just curious if any of those are conversations we want to continue tonight, or if they're a recommendation to council to have a discussion on. I just don't want that to go unnoticed and not brought up again.
Okay. Any more questions for staff? If not, then we'll open, well, it's a discussion item, but is there anyone in the audience, who wishes to speak on this topic? All right. The minutes are right,
Yeah, I didn't know where he was.
under tab 2.
Okay, thanks.
I did have one comment. It was not something that, it was something that was in the minutes. It's on page 2 of 6 also. Did not make it into the staff report, and that is the question of composting toilets. I have to admit, this is, once again, a matter of building standards and how you put a house together and what you put in it. But I did a little research on it myself, including asking some folks who ought to know in the community. The Ventura County Resource Management Agency has, as a part of it, the Ventura County Environmental Health Division. And my understanding is if you want a composting toilet, which is an item on which state law is currently silent, as far as I can tell. I've been looking through the state codes and haven't found it yet. It may be there. It's part of what you overall might call on-site wastewater treatment systems, OWTSs. But I have an email back from the sanitary district saying, actually passing on a message from the Resource Management Agency and the Environmental Health Division saying that in order to have a composting toilet, you must request permission from the Environmental Health Division, and they in turn have to request permission from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. There are 9 of those regional water quality control boards in the state, set up by state law. We are in Region 4, which is Los Angeles and Ventura counties. And this Mr. Charles Ginkel from the Environmental Health Division says they have not requested any, and they do not intend to request any because they know the answer will be no. So if you, at any rate, I have some names and numbers here. If it's something that staff would like to look into, I would say primarily for the Building Appeals Board, which is also the housing agency for the city when it comes to building standards. This is what I have found so far. It's not impossible, but the bureaucratic hurdles seem pretty high for doing that sort of thing.
We talked once about the incinerating toilet, Ray, did you say something about that in Ventura County, an incinerating toilet?
I actually didn't, but I can say that at a retreat facility I used to manage, we had 3 of them, and we had 3 Incinelettes. They were a little high maintenance, but they worked, even with 20 people on the property.
Yeah.
They worked and everything got incinerated. There was a little bit of aroma, but not aroma of waste, just of burn, you know. Sort of smelled like wood, but not even that strong. But they were functional. You have to empty it out when the ashtray is full. And
Not to put too fine a point on it, were they permitted or were they legal?
I don't know because I didn't install them. I was the manager of the property. They were already there.
These are some places we could find out if that sort of thing is legal.
Oh, I wonder,
Yes, sir.
okay, so if a house has a regular bathroom, is there a law that prevents someone from buying a toilet, a combustible toilet, and using it?
That once again,
there
like
is-
a composting toilet, from what I have found so far, state law is silent on the matter.
Right, so.
They define
so-
compost, but they don't define composting toilets.
So in this case, in most cases, people will just pull a permit for a regular bathroom. And if they want to go online, Amazon.com, and order themselves a composting toilet and sit on it, there is no law or anybody that's going to go and police that.
Yeah, very unlikely that there would be any compliance action. Whether there's a compliance issue might be a separate question.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
okay?
I will add that there's many states, and I understand California is silent, but there's many states that do allow it. Colorado, Florida, Massachusetts, Arkansas, the list goes on and
Florida,
on.
with the water table 6 inches underground. Whew, okay,
It's not going into the soil directly.
That's what's curious, that the
That's-
water, regional water thing, because it has,
It's not an outhouse.
It's not,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I think the confusion that I'm hearing and that I have heard in the past from some of our local agencies and other people who have spoke is they don't understand how the system, and there's more than one system, but how it works. So it's not like an outhouse. It's not where it's going back into the
it's
soil.
not a pit toilet.
No, it's
Yeah,
not a pit.
I
It's not
understand
going
that.
and affecting, it's not affecting any groundwater.
it's
Most of them-
compost.
They don't have any water, it's compost, yeah. So, but for now, okay.
And that's why I think this might be a subject for a little more searching by staff, so that the city might develop a policy on the matter. So, any more comments on the staff report and the summary of the things that we talked about that are recommended to be forwarded to the city council? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, go ahead. I think you were ahead of me.
So what I had mentioned previously about the lawns and moratorium on water, that list that I put, some of the questions we had, that was actually a request or a question to us. Was there more we wanted to discuss about that, or is that a recommendation we want to give to council? So we never really
Okay.
spoke on that.
What's,
But again, it was page 2 of 6 that proposed some thoughts
Right.
on the following. Vice Chair Nolan had these ideas.
I did,
Sure.
yeah, I did comment and make those suggestions.
not sure if the first one was rhetorical or not, but
Well,
Where is he right now? Oh,
those 6,
what's the sense of the commission here? Do we want to,
There are some items here on the low priority items, and they kind of cover a little bit of that considering, but they have to do more with commercial business, they're considering prohibiting certain business, commercial business, that excessive water use. It kind of falls under, where are we, types of categories. It's the last item under low priority items.
oh,
this
you're on
list.
you're on
Yeah.
the staff report. We were on the minutes.
Right, I know, but
Okay.
but the question is that you're thinking those things were left out of the staff report.
Yeah.
And I'm commenting, my comment is that they may have been covered in more of a general way in the low priority items.
the gray water bullet that the
Yes.
commissioner is speaking to is actually under gray water on page 2 of 3 of the recommended material.
Yes. So, well, then that brings up another question. Do my fellow commissioners feel like the conversation about eliminating lawns or restricting lawns below or moderate water usage, et cetera, in that list are a low priority? Or is that a higher priority because it uses so much water in lawn care?
If I could just say the lawn, actually, I had it under the medium priority, the top of page 2 of 3. It was the first bullet at the top of page 2, talking about either reducing the area or eliminating lawns altogether. So it was under the medium priority items.
I apologize.
Under landscaping. No, I can see, it's like I tried to get everything in there and put it, and the reason I put it in that category was it was more regulatory.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And there would be the question of, would the commission think that we should require lawns to be reduced in area or eliminated, or should we encourage that? Should we recommend to the city council that they require or encourage elimination of lawns, for example? Go ahead,
I'll
please.
make a comment on that, because I know I did bring it up last time. Presently, with the landscape standards and the modified water efficient landscape ordinance required by the state mandate, you can have a lawn, but remember at the beginning of the project, you basically look at the square footage of your project, delete all the hardscape, how much landscape area, even area that you may just be putting mulch is considered landscape area.
Sure.
So area that
Yep.
potentially could be irrigated and landscape. You take that, you square footage, and then based on the evapotranspiration rate, which is the loss of water through the soil and the loss of water through plant material, the combination of those two, there's a calculation that you do, and you come up with the amount of, the maximum allowable water allowance. So how much water that you can actually use on your landscape. Now, you can be creative with that, but you can't exceed it. And so when you're doing your landscape plan and your irrigation plan, you have to be savvy and know that you can't exceed that water amount. And then you have to, the designer has to actually sign and say, you know, and show the calculations on your submitted plans. So I guess where I'm going with that is, if somebody wanted to put in some turf, they could, but they couldn't exceed that water amount. Now, the only reason I brought it up for us to consider again is our drought situation, our water situation here in Ojai is extreme. So whether or not we'd want to consider making some alterations to the existing modified water efficient landscape ordinance, and lawn being one of them, is a consideration. And maybe it's a moratorium and it's temporary, or maybe it's permanent, I don't know. But the other thing I want to point out with, not all lawns are high water use. You can use pretty much, I only use alternative lawns, or even if somebody did Bermuda grass or kikuyu or St. Augustine, that's considered medium. Every plant has a water factor that it's given to you, and you have to put those in your calcs too. So, so I hate to say, oh, you can't have a lawn, but you could have a ground cover that may use the exact same amount of water. That's getting, you know, splitting hairs, in my opinion. So I guess the real question is do we want to be more strict in Ojai because of our water situation here now, permanently, or on a temporary basis? And then I think the other real big consideration, and we talked about this last time, is how many projects do we have coming through Planning Commission, or even if they're, I guess, ministerial.
Where this might actually apply.
Right, and what we ended up saying last time was the real target is, what about everybody else out there that's not going to be pulling a permit? And that got back to our education. So I threw it out there because I think it's worth looking at. But when we're talking about where could we have the most impact, do we just leave it the way it is because there are restrictions? And I have a feeling the next round of that mandate may even be more strict, but I can't say that for sure. So I'm almost tempted to say leave it the way it is.
Leave it in the medium priority.
Or we just say, we could even say, and do this as a temporary thing, no high water use plants are allowed at all. And we might say to a date uncertain based on our drought and weather conditions.
Well, it says that in the, okay, I just want to make clear what we're trying to achieve here with this report going to city council.
Right.
Because we are making that recommendation. We're just not getting, I mean, here it is. Minimize or prohibit installation of high water use plants and landscape features. You know, it's under the landscape item under the low priority.
Right.
As a
Right,
yeah, these bullet points.
yeah.
So I think they're there already, and as part of this report going to the city
Right, so
council,
we're just throwing it out to them,
we're saying we are recommending it in some respect, because it's there.
for them to consider it.
Yeah, and so I think the next process would be to deal with the high priority items that we can have an effect on right away, and then I see this as moving into the medium priority items after those are done. So I
Right.
don't think we're tabling it, or we're just,
Right.
we're prioritizing it. And we're still have it on the list of things to consider.
Okay, good.
So the freedom will still exist for those that already have lawns as part of their landscaping to remain having those lawns.
Right, because
and
we can't,
Make suggestions
Necessarily.
through our educational program of how to transition that or use a different kind of lawn that's lower maintenance.
Right.
Isn't there a program too that they're paying X amount per square foot to pull
Yeah.
out? So
I've
Casitas.
asked both Casitas and the state, and every time I've asked, they've said, yes, we have a program, but we don't have any money in it right now. So it's like
it
water,
varies,
it's like
yeah.
selling water allocations.
right,
It's water you don't have, but somebody will pay you for it because they could have it. It's,
So personally,
Yeah.
after looking at this list, I really feel Luke did a great job at capturing mostly everything that we said and prioritizing it in a very good way. And it does still say everything that we talked about. There's the gray water, there's the landscaping, there's the plumbing fixtures. There are all the things that I believe we talked about. And his priority is exactly the way, what we talked about.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that I think if we approve this and move it forward, start with the stuff we can work on, and then when we get to the medium priority, then we start to really get into the meat of the subject of trying and seeing if it actually, you know, raises to the level of adjusting an ordinance, a particular ordinance, because it's coming up anyway, isn't it? That landscape from the state,
Yeah,
isn't it
they're-
being rewritten right now?
They're working on it right now, and I know it's supposed to go into the 2020 Cal Green Building Code, and I think some of it, yeah, that's right. And I also wanted to thank you for just straightening that out with me. I mean, I was kind of saying what was in the next bullet without looking at it, so I apologize.
Right.
And I wanted to thank you. And then the other comment I wanted to make was, you know, this goes to city council, and if they wanted to send it back to us, could you explain that more, or could you, you know, elaborate? It could come back to us potentially, and we could do,
Right,
like, the next round if needed.
yeah.
It may not be needed, but,
I suspect the next round will be needed, because if you think about it,
yeah.
this is sort of like what I would envision a term sheet.
Yeah, it's an
be.
outline,
It is.
yes.
It's a list, it's a more specific than pie in the sky, but it's still fairly fluid recommendations. And if the city council is going to approve something, it's going to be written down in detail, and it's going to have citations of law and all that kind of stuff. So I suspect that we could start with something like this. We might, on the lawn thing, one might even consider saying, require for new projects or encourage for existing residences and commercial facilities that lawns be reduced in size. That's a little more specific. It's still something where I think if the city council says, yes, we like ideas 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10, they're gonna come back to us and say, now, where do you think this belongs in the code? And
Right.
what do you think ought to be
Right. Yeah,
changed?
to get down to the
And I would
specifics
think
of where,
that
where
that
it
would-
lives,
Yeah,
yes.
that would be our duty
Right.
again, to advise
But I think
on
it's
that.
real clear what we're asking here. It's bullet point, require or encourage lawns to be reduced in area or eliminated altogether.
Right?
Right, first sentence.
Yep.
So that's what we're asking. So it's very clear. So if they say, yes, good idea, all right, good idea, work on that.
Yeah,
Then now we take the next step, with the staff's
Say,
help to,
Here's specifically where we
we
think
can apply that.
and
Yeah.
how it should be said.
Yes, and
I-
how, and what ordinance it would fit under, where it would live, and how it would
Then,
be
if
enforced.
it goes back to staff, then the city attorney can say, okay, you can say that, but you can't say that,
Right.
sort of thing.
And so what I'm hoping that the city council will do is read that sentence and go, well, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something we should work on.
Oops, sorry.
Let the planning commission continue that line of thought, maybe make that a high priority versus a low priority, and work from there. And then it gives us direction and where to
Yeah.
go. So the outline to me is actually a very good first step.
I thought it was a superb
Yeah,
piece of
yeah,
work.
Yeah.
Okay, and now I have to go back, just to make this clear. I'm not sure that I brought it up last time
Huh.
just as a consideration for discussion.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that that's even necessary. The require and encourage lawns to be reduced in area or eliminated altogether for the very reason that I brought up earlier.
Yeah.
There's high water use lawns, there's low water use lawns, there's medium lawns. And you could say you can't have a lawn, but somebody could put in a ground cover. It's kind of semantics. And
Right.
Then a low water use lawn, for that matter.
Right, so to me, I think the better one is the second, the bullet item below that about possibly minimizing or prohibiting installation of high water use plants.
Right.
I think it's
exactly.
almost more appropriate, and once again, it's a consideration, not saying that they
Well,
have
that's
to
an
do it.
important point, because
But the
when I read
lawn
that
one-
first one, that's a real clear,
Right,
we're saying that
there's
we want to
real-
eliminate lawns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, but if there's no, it's like saying dairy's
Doesn't that-
bad. Well, is it
exactly.
raw, is it pasteurized, it's the same, it's kind of the same thing. So
Or-
I just want to be clear on that I'm not saying, I wasn't saying that we should, but it was more part of the conversation.
So why don't we just modify that sentence and say, require or encourage lawns to be low use, what do you use here?
Well,
don't know if I
the
just
second
strike the whole
sentence
thing.
says where near to.
With water-wise, with yeah,
think
or just
strike-
cross this whole thing?
Strike the first sentence, and then it says where new turf is grown, it should be suited to Ojai's
Okay, got it. Okay.
Which is part of the MWILO already, or serve an
Yeah.
alternate purpose, such as a vegetative swale.
But then,
I have a-
you've lost the thought of encouraging lawns to be reduced in area, and maybe that's okay.
Well, I'm
But
good.
we certainly want to encourage whenever lawns are replaced or when they're put in new, that
Right.
they,
Couldn't you just
that
say-
less water usage.
Require or encourage high water use lawns to be reduced in area?
Well, you could do that.
Yeah, that's
And then-
good.
And
That-
then let me ask you this, is this for the education, or is this actually for Article 12?
That's a compliance
Yeah, that's,
issue.
yeah, that
So
is.
compliance, I think what Bobby just said is probably the better.
I have another
term.
suggestion
High in there.
that
Thank you.
I have another suggestion that's actually going the other direction, which is being more detailed and having requirements is a possibility, but actually naming specific varietals that fit into that requirement. So, installations of lawns require such and such and such and such varietals. And so they know these are the varietals we can use, and it's part of Title 12. And
By saying, by limiting like a high water use, you're already narrowing yourself down, and the designer's gonna know, because you have to actually demonstrate on the plans and put a water factor next to all the plant material that you use, and you have to use that in your calculations. So by doing that, you're gonna narrow yourself and get you into the option list of medium to low water use lots.
so you're saying every landscape designer is already going to know low
Well,
water
they have
use
to know where
lawns
they've
are?
got, if they don't know, they need to look it up and they have to show it on the plan.
Okay.
Um,
So actually naming the varietals you don't think is necessary, or
no,
is?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
And then the,
It's limiting. There may be new
Yeah.
varietals that come along that are
Right.
also low water usage.
just the
If
high.
they're not on the list,
But
then
that might
they're out
be,
of luck.
that might be a good thing to include on the website
the education.
to educate
Yes.
people who already have a lawn.
I wanted to suggest that words like high water usage, low water usage, lawns, don't mean anything to the average citizen. And as you noted previously, there are relatively few new projects where a landscape architecture plan is appropriate. However appropriate it might be, it doesn't happen very often. And I think there's low-hanging fruit here in the education area to encourage people. My side yard right now is dead because I've had up to 8 pickups from contractors parked out there while they've been working on the remodel of my home. The time is going to come, summer or fall, when I have to do something about some lawn and some flower beds and stuff like that. And I would like to know what's low and what's high and what's medium water usage. And so something like that tied to the city website with common names as well as the Latin names of whatever plants they are, I think would be a service to the community. And the vast majority of the land in the community, which is not new developed land, would then at least have some guidance and some thoughts from the city as to what we think would be a wise thing to do.
So is it, then we're focusing back on this document, and
Right.
approving it for city
Yes.
council. What you just said is, again, part of the first
Part of the high
recommendation,
priority
high
stuff.
priority. Part of what you said, Ray, can be and is part of medium priority. It's just not all detailed out, but it's not meant to be yet, because we just,
Yeah.
that one subject in itself will require probably at least 1 or 2 meetings just to hash out a way to, especially if it turns into some kind of moratorium or elimination. It's not something that we can make a recommendation on today regardless. There's not enough information on that. So again, what we've done here, or that Luke has done, is prioritize our program that we're suggesting the city council to consider, and go for that low-hanging fruit and the high-priority items right away, work on those. And again, this outlines, I do suggest we change that to require or encourage high water lawns, just for clarification, even though they don't mean anything, because we're not writing an ordinance here. We just want to be more clear what we're saying.
But we're more succinctly stating the topic.
Exactly.
Yes, okay.
So I'm ready to make a motion,
Are there
actually,
any
to-
other suggestions as to rewording any part of this document?
I have one.
Please go ahead.
And this would be the last, well, let's see, wait a minute. I'll do this as a separate one. We have discussed several times here at Planning Commission the issue of not adequate fire
Water for fire suppression, yes.
suppression being available. So we know that there's generally an issue, and we know that Casitas has taken over Golden State, and they're still trying to get up to speed and what have you. And then we've also had the discussion of, I'm just gonna use this for example, I'm not against breweries, but we have said, right now, do we want to allow projects like a brewery that would be a high water use to be permitted, considering our drought and water situation? We never came to a conclusion, but we've had numerous discussions. So I'm wondering if this is another thing that we may want to send to city council for them to consider. And they would have to work with Casitas on this, but could there be a verification form of water capacity? So if a new project is coming, they come to the city and they're saying, we're thinking about doing whatever it is. If it's a brewery, maybe it's a residential and they're gonna do something, and they're way up at the outskirts of town. Part of being able to come back and get your DRP or get your permitting, or prior to your permitting rather, would be, you would have to have this verification from available water capacity. So they'd have to go to Casitas and say, oh, wow, I'm, 2,000 feet away from a fire hydrant, or we know there isn't adequate pressure there, or maybe based on the pipelines, we don't have adequate water going to that neck of where you want to build. So once you have that verification, then I'm not sure how to work, but maybe the onus would be on the property owner to have to pay to upgrade. Or maybe the Casitas would do it, I'm not sure. But it's another way of looking at, okay, we have a water issue here, and we've talked about, do we allow more permitting, or permitting of projects that have higher water? I'm just throwing it out there as
Yes,
a
and I
discussion.
agree with you completely on the
Yeah.
general issue of fire and
Right.
water and fire safety. I'm not sure that it's a part of the water-wise. I think it might be a worthwhile topic to take up separately, because I agree with you. If we have an applicant come to us who, if the worst happened and there was a fire in that project and there was no water there, then we would want to know that, and we might want to think twice before permitting the project prior to some demonstration that there was sufficient water for fire suppression. I'm just not sure it belongs in this list. Yes, Chester?
Well, you were looking at the last item there, which
Yeah.
talks about, is there
The second
any?
half of the last item.
Yeah, it kind of, consider prohibiting certain types of commercial businesses that are excessive water users, given that Ojai is not an ideal location for such uses, or require such business to demonstrate they can operate a water-wise manner through a best practice in technology. That kind of sums up what you just said to me. Do you want to add anything to that you think? Because that is essentially what you're going after.
Yeah. Other than I was saying, do we need some verification from the actual water purveyor, meaning like Casitas in this instance?
Yeah, how would we measure it? Is that what you're saying? How would we measure best, what's the
Well,
best?
there are standards for
Yeah.
static and dynamic water
Yeah.
pressure and water flow at a hydrant, and it should be a certain maximum distance from the property.
Talking about fire
that's
suppression.
fire
That's fire
safety.
suppression, yeah.
Right. Now, this here, yeah, I would hesitate more than once before advocating that we prohibit otherwise legal businesses
Right.
on the basis that they use a lot of water. But I would be perfectly happy to recommend that the city council require such businesses to demonstrate they can operate in a water-wise manner. So the second half of that
Right.
last bullet, I'm completely in favor of.
And
The
we may
first
be.
half, I'm
we-
not
Well, we
in
may be,
favor of.
it depends on what it is,
Sure.
That's what I'm saying. So, all we're saying is consider, right there. We're considering prohibiting certain types of commercial businesses. The question is, what are those businesses? That's what the city council will say. Well, what are you talking about?
Well,
And is breweries one of them, Because
Yeah.
we seem to be getting a few of those coming through the planning commission.
yes,
I guess
we
maybe
are.
we should answer that question sooner than later, because that's
Well,
probably
yeah.
the one that's gonna,
My personal position is that we ought not to be recommending to the city council that they even consider prohibiting otherwise legal businesses, but requiring that they demonstrate they can operate in a water-wise manner, I think would not only be
Right, right.
appropriate, but it ought to be required.
so why don't we strike out that first sentence then, and just keep the
Uh-huh.
last sentence?
I would be completely in favor of that.
I would too.
Yeah,
Would you? Okay. So we have, so we would say then,
We-
instead of starting that with or, we would say require
Mm-hmm.
certain types of commercial businesses that are excessive water users to demonstrate.
it can operate, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's perfect to me.
And then what, a set of criteria will be in place that they'll demonstrate
We'll have to work on,
towards.
we'll have
and
to work
then-
on that.
And
yeah.
then their design, their DRP doesn't get approved if they don't demonstrate
Right.
to our.
That's a
That would be
that's a
what I
job,
think we're
yeah.
aiming for
Yeah.
here,
And that's
yes.
why it's it's on a lower priority, because it's a bigger job to do, because that's a lot of work and research to do to get that information
Yeah,
clear.
I agree with the way we just changed that. My concern is just how long everything takes, and we do have projects coming towards us that we won't have any criteria for, and they'll
yeah.
get passed through, and then a year
Till we
from
get
now-
something back from the city council, we're not gonna have any criteria anyway, either for fire safety or for low water usage. We're not gonna have any hard and fast standards that we can point to as a reason for denying a permit.
Right. So this is a suggestion, maybe when it does come back to us. So for instance, I printed out, this is Cal Green, and this is for commercial, and of course, there's a residential one also. But basically, they have a whole list of required things. There's water on here, water issues amongst other things. But some of the things are mandatory and some are elective. This could be a good starting point because it's already part of the state building code, the Cal Green, if somebody wants to go with that option. And we may want to go through and look at this. I think to me, it's like, it's already done. We just need to go through it. If, in fact, city
This-
council
yeah.
asks.
This sounds like
Yeah.
what we ought to be doing on the second round of this
Exa-
stuff.
Right, and I'm just sharing this, that it could be a good
Yeah.
starting
Okay.
point.
Is it legal for you to share that via email, that link to that?
Well,
I don't want to violate
we
anything.
could send it to Sherry and.
Sherry and share it. Yeah, because I'd
yeah,
love to see
There's a
that.
residential, and you can go on to.
Luke ought to get a copy of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure he knows it. But yeah,
So the other thing that Vice Chair Nolan brought up was a residential home. So I'm curious who the onus goes on to. Let's say someone in the far reaches of the city wants to build an ADU and there's no hydrant around. And the house is already susceptible to fire. Is the onus on the municipal to make sure there's water there, or do we not allow that ADU to be built because there isn't any way to
That's-
protect it?
That's a very tough choice. If the ADU is in danger, then the main house is in danger already.
Right,
I can
but do
comment
we
on
allow an ADU? And I'm pointing to what Vice Chair Nolan was
I have something to say
speaking of.
about that. First of all, it seems to me that it should be the responsibility of the water purveyor to make sure that there are hydrants in
Absolutely.
the whole area.
Right.
And second of all, from the workshop that I attended about the ADU, we don't have the right to say they can't build it because there's no hydrant.
That's right.
It's the responsibility of the water company to make sure there's a hydrant. They want no barriers to an ADU.
So can a homeowner request of the water purveyor to put one in? Can they say, you need to put a hydrant
Well,
here? And
I don't think the homeowner should be required to pay for that. I
No,
think
no, no,
that's
no,
the
no.
water company's
No, no, but
responsibility.
yeah, and that wasn't my statement. I was thinking, can the homeowner call up Casitas Municipal and say, you need to put a hydrant in here?
Well-
And legally, it's their
Would that be a,
Yeah,
responsibility to put one in.
where would that fall under? I don't know if
Wouldn't
that'd
that
even
be
fall
kind
under
of-
our
No,
purview.
It doesn't fall under zoning or land
Yeah.
use. It's something that we can recommend the city council consider negotiating some terms with the water purveyor to ensure that any underserved areas of the city have their water system upgraded.
Right.
But I've always looked for two things when people come to the city for a permit or anything else. One, the rules have to be written down and understandable by the average citizen. And two, if the city either says yes or no, the city should be able to point to something that's written somewhere that says, this is the basis for saying yes or no. And that's lost a lot of times on the average citizen as well. I don't think that we have anything right now in the fire safety area that we can point to that says this is a basis for saying you can't build an ADU there because it's unsafe. I don't think that the three laws that I've seen, 1069, SB 35, and the new one, SB 229, I think, are the three state laws that are dealing with ADUs. None of them mention fire safety. And so we don't have a basis for saying yes or no right now. I think it might be useful to suggest in another venue that we recommend to the city council that they take up that topic with the water purveyor. Because I think it's a serious issue.
Could I break in here for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Every project, every development project that comes to us has to have a can and will serve letter from the water company. And also, they have to have fire department approval. Between those two, the water company is saying, yes, we can provide water to you. And the fire department is saying, yes, we have inspected the property and we feel comfortable approving it. Or
Figure out
they'll tell
we
you-
can do fire suppression there.
yeah, or they'll tell you there's a problem and it has to be mitigated. But we just haven't seen any projects come through here in
No,
year or two.
everything's been
that
close
we've had
in
to
on
do
the
it. But
water system.
Sherry, you're probably familiar with those can and will serve letters.
Yeah,
You
and
have to go to the water company and get that letter before you can come and submit.
sure, and it's pretty typical in all the
Yeah.
permits we get
You'll
on.
you'll get them in our packets, so it's,
Well, maybe we're
Standard-
covered by that.
it's standard
just,
procedure.
It
Just have never seen it.
is, and usually there's, from what, the permits I had to pull from the fire department, they're looking at 200, 300 feet from the structure, having to have some hydrant or some way of suppressing the fire, and that's usually a requirement, and they figure out. You know, I'm surprised to hear that there isn't adequate hydrants in town. And it's probably in areas that have been developed a long time ago that don't require new permits. Because anything
Yeah.
that requires something new, there's that requirement there.
Yeah,
And I've seen them-
anecdotally, yeah.
Yeah,
and if
What
you
I've
want-
heard anecdotally is not that there are not enough fire hydrants around, although it happens on occasion, and I've heard about South Ventura Street here not having fire hydrants between here and the
Right.
creek, for example. And that's a lot more than
Right.
double 300 or 500 feet. But if the will serve letter is a restraint on that fire hazard business, then I think that's a good start anyway.
it won't be, though. The will serve letter is providing water to the structure. The fire department is the one who looks at the fire hydrant, not
Okay.
Casitas.
But if,
Casitas doesn't look at that.
but if in fact the project is under 1,000 square feet, say somebody was putting an ADU in, the fire department doesn't do anything
Well, it's
except
not-
charge you
it's
$250.
exactly, well, they actually look at it, you know, and they determine that,
They do,
like
huh?
John said, they determine, well, two things. Can they
They do their
supply-
duty at
yeah,
your
yeah,
property,
on your
yeah.
property. And that's what they'll sign off. And it's a pretty easy read for them. They just look at where your address is, and they have all their maps down there. And they pretty much approve that pretty quick because they know where everything is.
Well, now I feel much better about my $250.
Okay,
If you'd like to find more about that, the cottages and the flowers, which we approved 8 years ago.
many
something like
years
that,
ago.
They can tell you some long stories about having to comply with the fire department because they had to replumb their whole site and they had to change their whole site plan in order to provide access for fire trucks and
Yeah.
all
Oh,
nine
it-
yards, so.
I mean, I've done a project, I'm waiting for a Caltrans permit right now.
Yeah.
I had to upgrade that project we're on to a 2-inch line. So it's a requirement,
Yeah,
believe me, and
it
it's an
comes out.
expensive requirement when they make you do it.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
so-
let's try to get back to water-wise for the moment then, and we'll leave fire safety,
Right.
I guess, temporarily to the fire department. I have heard, I think, in a general consensus on 2 changes to the document. First, on page 2 of 3, the first bullet, first line, inserting high water usage between encourage and lawns. And then on the last bullet, the second bullet on page 3 of 3, consider rewording it to say, consider requiring certain types of commercial businesses that are excessive water users, given that Ojai is not an ideal location for such usage, then striking or require such businesses so that it says, consider requiring these certain types of businesses to demonstrate that they can operate in a water-wise manner. Are there any other?
I would just make it simpler on that last one. I would just say, require businesses to demonstrate they can operate in a water-wise manner through best practices and technology.
Just require any businesses,
Yes, yes.
okay?
Yeah, then we're not,
Yeah, picking on anyone,
Right.
because it's really a policy that should be broad.
Okay, require
Businesses,
commercial businesses, strike the rest of that line,
to demonstrate.
to demonstrate they can operate in a water-wise manner.
Mhm.
Okay, any other changes that we'd like to make to the recommendation?
I thought that you had said on the first bullet point on top of page 2, or eliminate altogether, you wanted to strike that.
I think we changed that to high water. We went,
So you want
Well-
to still have them eliminate as well? Okay.
yeah, I think you want, because I think you want to consider, I mean, there's a strong point in eliminating high usage areas. So I think we keep it in there.
Yeah, and the recommendation is require or encourage.
Yeah, and we're.
Leave that to the legislators.
Yeah, reduce an area or eliminate,
Yeah.
you know. And in some cases, elimination might be the right thing to do.
Yes, ma'am.
And the last item that I wanted to add, even though I know it's on the low priority item, was to have them consider adopting the Ventura County applicant's landscape consultant's checklist and certificate of compliance, or using it as a template.
Well, that changes it
So
to, that
consider,
changes it to
consider
low-hanging fruit.
using,
Well, it already was on low-hanging fruit.
Oh, it is?
It was on low priority, but since we're going
No,
through the
no,
whole
no, no,
list.
no, low-hanging fruit meant high priority. So
Well, that's true, that's right, you're right.
Yeah, so,
So
because
would
that's
we-
an easy thing to act upon.
Yeah, that's true, now I hear what you're saying.
So what I'm saying is that if you go to the first page, we have landscaping in there as well, maybe we put it there.
That's true, yeah.
And that way, because it's easier to, because that sounds like something they can implement right away if they want to consider that. Because we already, I understand what you're asking for from a real practical standpoint. Here there are all these rules and laws, but we don't have a way to inspect them. We just sign them off.
so would we say,
Right.
consider this Ventura County document, whatever you call it,
Mm-hmm.
as a point of departure for a consultant checklist and certificate of compliance for the city?
Right.
Yes,
Because
yeah,
And I would just,
they
I would
decide
just,
there are things in there that they'd like to see different.
and I would just put
That's
that
true.
as a bullet point underneath the high priority item.
Okay?
Because
so-
that could be done right away. We don't need to
Possibly.
wait. Yeah.
So we'd say, consider using the Ventura County
applicants,
applicants, okay?
landscape consultants, checklist and certificate of compliance.
For the purpose of, and then let's make a statement there so they know why we're asking.
Because there is an existing,
To ensure
um,
following MWILO.
well, that'd be easy, you could just say that.
Okay.
To ensure projects comply with WILO.
Right.
Okay? So consider using the Ventura County applicant's landscape consultant's checklist and certificate of compliance to ensure projects comply with
Yeah, compliance
comply
with
with
WILA.
MWILO. And considering using it could mean, yeah, most of it, but we'll adapt some of it,
Right.
yeah.
It's a template.
Okay, so that would be the third recommended change to this list.
Right.
Are there any others that we'd like to see going forward as a recommendation to City Council? All right, then could we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that, I'm
Yes,
not
sir.
going to repeat everything he said since we have it on record.
As amended.
But as amended, let's see, I move that we approve moving this forward to the city council for consideration. And with the amended,
The three
three
amended.
amended items
As
that we
discussed.
stated. I guess that's about it.
Okay.
There's not a clear,
Is there a second to the
I
motion?
second it.
Very good. Commissioner Corbin seconds. Any other discussion? Could we take a vote, Sherry?
Jagiello,
yes?
Corbin,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes.
Quillisi,
Yes?
Merck,
Yes.
Powers.
Yes.
Excellent.
Chair,
Yes, sir?
just for sake of those that may be listening at home or watch it later, I want to just define what this is, which is, what we just voted on was the water-wise development standards and the Planning Commission's recommendations to City Council that staff put together.
Right. I think the motion should probably reflect the title of the document. Incorporated by reference,
So I'd like to amend my motion. I can't do it now. It's already been voted on. Okay.
to name the document. Okay, well, let's,
Couldn't find the name of the document.
it's in bold print at the top of the first page. No, that's the staff report.
Oh, the actual.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. We're on to informational items, tab 5, director decisions. Mr. Connolly.
I'm actually not sure what we would need to cover here under the director decisions, other than this
This
reflects
is what you've done. Does
what
anyone
they
have any
are.
questions, I guess?
I did have a question about 2 trees that got cut down in the last 2 weeks over on the Chaparral School property. They were really mature pepper trees, and I'm sure they weren't in great shape, but did they get a tree permit from you for cutting those down?
My guess is, unless you had something to say, Sherry, the California pepper trees wouldn't have the protections the oaks and the sycamores have. Would be first thing I'd say offhand. I wasn't aware of the trees coming down either, so.
As well as the city has no jurisdiction over the school district properties.
Well, that's true too. Sometimes school districts actually go through
There's a
cities, but
killer.
it's true that they're not obligated to do that.
I understand that.
Yep.
Okay.
I'd just like to let them know that we noticed. If you
Any
drive by the
questions
corner,
for
of-
Mr.
They were
Connolly?
large, mature trees, I take
yeah,
it,
the
so.
corner of Aliso and Montgomery looks completely different now because trees were removed.
Any other questions for Mr. Connolly on the director decisions?
Yeah, I had
Yes, ma'am.
a quick question. I had a member of the public contact me, and it was in regards to the pedicab business. Scott Lang and Peter Laramendi, the Ojai rickshaw.
Okay.
And I guess my question was, so was it approved for them to move forward on that?
Yeah, if I remember, that was just literally a home office.
Oh, just for the office?
That was
Okay.
all it
Hold the
was.
business or permit
Correct.
thing.
It was, I could see where the rickshaw might be alarming, but
Why was it
it
alarming?
was
I
just the
like it.
office
I-
and not a mobile office.
As chair of the Complete Streets Committee, alternate transportation is very important to me.
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay.
The
Very
best
good.
rickshaws are the bicycle rickshaws in New York City. If you've ever been on one, it's a journey.
Oh, so
worth
it's
the
not
trip.
a home office on a rickshaw?
No, it's affixed.
A home office with a rickshaw in it that's dispatchable. Future agenda items, then. We're on to tab 6, folks. I see tiny homes on May 16th. Is this tiny homes on wheels or tiny homes not on wheels?
Tiny homes on wheels, so
On
it will be
wheels.
a confined, if it can maintain a confined discussion, that's the goal, because that was what had gone before the city council in March
10-2.1709L.
and was directed back to commission. So I know tiny homes can sort of expand, although it's a tiny subject. This is on wheels.
This is on wheels, okay.
Yes.
I have a question on this one, just because I've gotten some feedback on, I think the public would like clarification on what the mission of the what the conversation or what the goal of the planning commission will be on that particular night.
I think the focus is to consider the tiny homes on wheels to be an alternative type of accessory dwelling unit.
Are we
So
going to actually be reviewing an ordinance? That's the more specific question.
There was a draft ordinance that was presented
Correct.
to the city council,
Yes,
and they are sending that to us to consider.
right.
Okay.
Probably along with other standards and information, but yes, this is essentially would modify the existing code to integrate tiny homes on wheels as a form of accessory dwelling unit. So for all intents and purposes, you'd be treating these as much like an accessory dwelling as possible.
Got it. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not to state any positions at this point, but to understand the topic for the
Right.
next meeting.
And to know what level it's coming to us at. So it
Yeah.
sounds like it's coming to us in an ordinance format, and it's going to be a very important discussion.
The minutes of the last city council, or the packet for the last city council, had a draft ordinance in it.
Right.
You can look that up.
Yeah, I've looked it up.
Okay. I would refer back to the list from our April 4th meeting that Council Member Haney brought to us, noting 6 or 7 things that we should be working on. One of them was water-wise standards. That happened to be number 7 on a list of 7. I don't think it was a prioritized list, but I think it would be fair to say that we have done what we can at this point on that. But I would like to start on May 16th, just taking these items one at a time. And we have 6 meetings. We can take one title per meeting, probably take longer on Title 10 corrections. But for example, the topics are fences, hedge, and walls, missing lot coverage standards. There's a table in the municipal code that says under these various zoning designations, you have certain lot coverage standards, and they are not all specified. And so the city council is looking for our recommendation on what to fill in the blanks with. And there are other CDD intake form and other things. Changing, the VMU to a special district. I'm not sure what that is, and we'd need some help from staff to understand. And then design guidelines, especially for East Ojai Avenue, not covered by existing design guidelines. So is it the pleasure, which of the 6 is it the pleasure of the commission that we take up the next time?
Well, it sounds like the tiny
Oh,
homes is
you've
one
got
of
the
them.
list there.
Yeah,
Is that a different?
yeah.
Looks like maybe some.
It looks like it's close. Tiny homes is on here and it's
Right.
not on here. I
Right.
watched the meeting over again and wrote down what
Okay.
Councilmember Haney
So,
said.
so I think May 16th is tiny homes, so we should just leave that one alone. There's going to be a
Oh.
lot of discussion on that.
Right.
So we should take, but we have blanks for June 6th and June 20th, even though I'm not sure I'll be here, because I don't know if I'll be reinstated. But my commission is up on the 22nd.
Confidence is high, Chester.
So the 6th and 20th are wide open.
Yep.
So you're suggesting May 6th tiny home
No,
conversation?
June 6th.
No, I know,
Oh.
but you're suggesting that the tiny home conversation on May 16th is going to take up the whole meeting?
It is, yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to an ordinance. That's big stuff. Yeah.
So why don't we try to knock off some of the low-hanging fruit then? And let's take missing lot coverage standards.
So I have a question about that,
Yes?
that particular thing.
Okay.
Does that conversation include possible zoning overlays that would allow for cluster housing on larger parcels?
Does lot coverage standards fall into that topic that you just mentioned? I would say it does. Because the number of residences that you put on a piece of property directly affects the lot coverage.
Okay.
But the number of residences allowed on a particular piece of property is a different topic
That's what I'm
specifically
speaking
from lot
Language.
coverage.
Yes, okay.
And if you would like to bring that up
Well, there's
as
still
a
an
separate
urgency.
topic, I think it's worth discussing.
Yeah, there's an urgency that, you know, I think a lot of people are still forgetting about, and that's, you know, people who lost their homes or were displaced during the fire in December, and there's ranches and large acreage that are only allowed to have one ADU, and I know I've spoken to some homeowners that have large acreage, and they would like to build 3 or 4 units on their property and aren't allowed.
I think it's a
I
topic
think that's a
worth
huge
discussing.
topic, and I'm
Yeah.
very much in favor. I would prioritize that, 100%.
Yeah. Do you think we can discuss that at the same time as specifically missing lot coverage standards and get it done in one meeting?
Yeah, because the
and-
missing
and
lot
recommend
coverage,
something pithy?
the missing
city
lot
council.
coverage standard should really be coming from staff, I would think, based on research of what's in the area. It should not be something we're making up.
It's in a table that's in
I know,
the
that's what I'm
code
saying.
right now,
So it's really just a clarification of something that should already exist, but it's not specifically
okay?
clarified yet. So that should be an easy one.
It should be.
Yeah.
That's why I picked it first.
The
because it
other
should be
is
an easy one.
is a very important one, and I think you can easily do the two. That's my opinion.
I think we could do both in one. Well, why don't we shoot for doing the two of those on June 6th then?
Okay. Well, that would be Luke's.
No,
He's
and I
gonna
just,
have to
no, and
prep
I
for
just
that.
wanted
He'll
to
have to
weigh in
prep for
because
that.
while I haven't dug into it, I think the lot coverage standard, just looking at it, I think it's 3 residential zoning districts. They're the larger lots where there's no coverage specified.
Right.
Which doesn't, I would actually throw out the option, do you need it? Because these are really large minimum
The
lot
city
size
council
parcels.
asked us to consider the topic of missing lot
Right.
coverage standards.
Right.
And I think we should go do that, even if we recommend that the larger ones don't have a limit.
Right. Because my experience in other cities is a lot of times coverage, if the goal is to have somebody not build a 15,000 square foot house, you might want to put a cap on the house size rather than coverage, because if somebody's got 5 acres and you say 5% coverage, that's still a huge house. So, but the second part of that with multiple units, that's more of a policy question too, because you're now talking about increased density in single-family zones.
Absolutely, that's a big one.
But
That's-
I think you could do them both at the same
Okay.
time, because
Yeah.
coverage
Yeah.
to me, unless I'm missing it, and it's 3 zoning districts only, that's pretty simple.
That's what I'm saying, that's what
Okay.
I see as well. I
So,
see that as
so
a-
why don't we plan on June 6th then? We'll talk about lot coverage standards, missing lot coverage standards, and, for lack of a better name, call it multiple ADUs on a parcel.
Or increased densities
Or-
so that we have.
Is that what ADU, legal non-conforming status definition means?
No,
What is that?
I think it should be
even know what
increased
that is.
density and not limited to saying that it's an ADU. Maybe that's what
Okay,
the outcome will be.
okay.
I'm not sure, but maybe we go
Okay.
into it being a little
Or-
more open and flexible.
or call it lot coverage and density standards.
Well, no, because we're talking about multiple units on one, I mean, that's a specific subject.
But density is a separate topic from
But
lot coverage.
Density, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of more, it's very general.
Yeah,
Density, versus, wanting to, because very specifically to do an ADU, another ADU unit is a very specific thing, and that has to do with the questions of guest house, alternative buildings, art studios, other
accessory
ADUs. Those-
dwellings,
yeah,
or
and those are-
accessory buildings, accessory dwelling units,
Right.
guest houses.
So density,
all different, yeah.
I guess if that applies to multiple different variations of units on a particular parcel, then I'm in agreement, but it doesn't mean that to me right off the top.
What's a good name for the topic? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember
I might be able to add
Blatz.
something here to this discussion. When we took up the ADU unit, the council already decided on what the density was going to be. So that would be something, if you wanted to look at it, you'd have to see what we decided upon, because we looked at large parcels and what we were going to do, what we were going to allow, how many, and then also small parcels. And there was a split decision on the council. I think it was 3-2 as to the density on small parcels, because some of the council members only thought that we should have it on larger parcels. But you might want to take a look at that and see what we decided, and then it would come back as a recommendation for us to redo it. I don't think we're asking right now.
Recommendation to reconsider.
Yeah, I don't think we're asking you to revisit it, but if in your discussion on lot size and lot densities, if that comes up, then you can come back to us with a recommendation.
Okay,
But we didn't decide it that long ago. It was within the last 60 days, I believe. Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Just a comment on this also. We were just discussing or the possibility of a cluster housing, which we've been bringing up over the last several years.
Yeah.
And that may be something completely different than what we have as far as, a main residence, an ADU, and a guest house. We're talking about,
So
Could be-
does it all fall under density? That's my question.
I think,
Yeah, that's
but if we wanted, if we
all the
wanted
different
to open.
variations of the theme.
Right.
Cluster housing, multiple ADUs, guest house, and then, well, right now, we can have a guest house and an ADU as long as the guest house, has a half bath.
If you have a guest
As a
house, you
bathroom
can
and a
add an
kitchen,
ADU,
right.
but if you have an
Mhm.
ADU, you can't add a guest house.
Right.
But the cluster housing is not even anywhere in
Right.
our code, and so that's something new.
Yeah, an
And
example
that's
would,
something we're interested in, and we have been interested in.
an example would be an agricultural farm here who wants to house their farm workers. And let's say there's 3 families of farm workers and they want to provide housing so they don't have to commute in
They're
from
not
Ventura.
subdividing the farm.
And they're not subdividing, so,
Right.
so
The
that's
question-
an example of
But then I
a
have to-
cluster house.
I have to ask the question, though, we're here to
That's land use.
serve the city council and their needs.
Yes.
So are they asking us to do that? I don't hear that they are.
Well, it's part of the sustainability committee and this SLRI that we've been speaking out for a long time, the Sustainable Living Research Initiative
but
and all
I
of that.
guess what I'm looking at is that we're talking about, I thought the discussion was around what the city council had assigned to us.
I think
Correct.
those should be the highest priority topics for this body. But in discussing one of those topics, if we stray into a related area,
Okay,
I think we can make that a part of the recommendation to the city council.
okay.
But let's take on that lot coverage and multiple additional dwellings or outbuildings or whatever you want to call it. Luke, if you can come up with a good name for the topic.
I think it's density, but it's,
It's sort of density, but it may be other things too.
We'll try to keep it under the umbrella of coverage,
Yes.
coverage, yes.
because
Okay.
it's related. I think coverage is, what I'm getting was the council really was focused on, because there's a lack of standards for those
There's a
zoning
lack of
districts.
standards in the code,
But of
right?
course, density can affect your coverage, because you
Right.
could have more units or more floor area, so.
Right, okay, okay. And then, meeting by meeting, we'll try to take on more of these things and work off our task list.
So if we sway into that conversation of cluster housing on the next thing, that's the appropriate time to
To perhaps add to the recommendation to the
Yeah,
council.
okay.
Yeah. And then maybe we could take on June 20th, design guidelines, especially for East Ojai Avenue, not covered by existing design guidelines. I think back to the case that came before us for the new restaurant at the corner of Montgomery and Ojai Avenue, southwest corner, where it's not covered by the design guidelines for East Ojai, East End. It's not covered by the arcade, it's not covered by the arcade plaza. It's just there in the commercial district. So I think it would be worthwhile talking about those, and I would recommend as reading for that meeting that everybody go back and look at the 3 design guideline books that we have right now: Arcade, Arcade Plaza, and East End. I don't know of any others. If there are others, perhaps Luke could tell us at the next meeting, so that we can all be caught up on the topic and be prepared to talk about that on June 20th.
It would be nice to have a map to identify which, is it already there? But the map that identifies the guidelines and where they
Sherry puts
apply.
a City of Ojai zoning map and a City of Ojai general plan land use map in the back of the book every time.
Okay, but we're talking about guidelines now, and design
Oh, a
guidelines.
design guidelines
So
map,
design
okay, yeah.
guideline map, so I know
Right.
which areas we're talking about that
Well,
are
if
covered
you-
by
yeah.
which design
If you look at the
guideline.
design guidelines, each of them has a map in it.
Would it be good, though, to see this as a whole, since I think
Sure.
part of your goal is to
Right, see what's
apply
missing.
some of those things and see
Sure.
what gaps are missing in the map,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Just for clarification, so when you say items not included, you're referring to properties that don't fall into
Properties
one
that
of
don't
those
include it,
3
yes,
guidelines?
yes, sorry.
Okay.
Properties that don't fall into one of those 3 design
That
guideline
should,
areas.
that should, right,
That
Cross
that
over.
arguably should.
right.
We may decide to recommend no action,
Okay.
but we could also recommend enlarging certain areas or the applicability of certain design guidelines.
It doesn't
or-
have to
or
be a
other
fancy
things.
map, it just needs to be some outline to know where this other
Could you do
third
that,
district,
Luke?
where's
Yeah.
the third district? I got the plaza and the arcade.
Right.
What's
The East
the
End.
The East End is the one that's vague for me.
Yeah, exactly.
it
Where is the
goes,
East End? That's a
you know?
little
That's
bit amorphous.
yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you want to know where those are at and where the gap is, and
Yeah.
you're
Exactly.
essentially considering filling in the gap, whether it be
Just-
new
yeah, yeah.
guidelines or you, I guess, presumably
Simple
could even
city map
include it
with
in
3
another one.
outlined areas on
Right.
it would,
Yeah.
There's also
would
the
serve us
redevelopment.
beautifully.
Yeah, yes.
There's also the redevelopment area statement of theme.
Okay, that should be.
Okay? And what that means. All right, any other comments or questions on future agenda items?
I have a comment. And in all respect to what Councilman Haney is ascribing us to do. And that's on our agenda page where it says discussion items suggested by the Planning Commission. And I'm reading that list, and to me, almost all of those are pretty high priority conversations to have in lieu of what's happening right here, right now in the city of Ojai. And I would hate to see some of those just put aside. And again, I understand we've been asked to do that, and that's our role as a commission. So I don't want to ignore what Councilman Haney has asked us to do. We are including them. I also don't want to forget about this list, the, emergency housing issues, fire-safe community, and a joint effort with Building Appeals Board, water availability for fire suppression, et cetera, which are very current, very important
Well, I think
things.
some of those items, I agree with Commissioner Powers, that they are relevant to some of our approvals. For instance, the parking and the in-loop parking fees, that comes up enough times for us to have more clarification on that issue that directly affects some of the decisions that we're making.
Well, that parking and parking in lieu fees
Yeah, is
could
it-
be a part of any one of the design guidelines,
Right.
because it's very obviously land use.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would suggest that we take up, as time permits, parking and parking in lieu fees,
Right.
as we discuss the design guidelines that are without a current area
You mean for the
June 20th meeting.
June 20th meeting? Okay.
And while we are talking about those areas that are not covered by a design guideline, it would be worthwhile to say, if we find an inadequacy in one of the existing design guidelines, that we could include that with recommendations to the council.
Yes, okay.
Okay?
That's fine. So you want to, so you're basically saying
That
you want to
work for
include
you, Ray?
parking? Yeah,
For that one topic, yes.
So you basically want to include parking and parking in lieu fees on that day?
I think
Yeah.
that would, it's a reasonably.
Because that's the work, that's
yeah.
work for
It's a
Luke to
reasonably
do.
related
Yeah,
topic, I think.
yeah.
Others, I think we should pick up as we go. Some of them, general plan update, affordable housing,
Those are big,
those are big, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where we go with that.
yeah.
The fire safe community, joint effort with the BAB, we've already talked about a little bit today, water availability, SLRI. I'm not sure how to deal with that. I'm sufficiently ignorant about SLRI that I can't even hazard a guess as to where it falls into the rules that we live by, or should live by, or that should be in the code, or that should
Well,
be in
I-
a term sheet to the city council.
Well, do
So
we
that's
still have the
probably a
sustainable
meeting all
committee?
by itself.
Does that still exist?
I recently met with Ben Warner, and possibly what I could do is just do like a, 5-minute or less report at one of our upcoming meetings and just give a little update.
Okay?
Keep it simple, and then from there, we can decide if we need to go.
Do we need to recommend anything to the city council? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're ready,
Okay.
bring it on. I notice that both those meetings are after your current term expires.
Yeah, all right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's a hard decision to make. Okay, any other comments on future topics?
Do you need to get approval from city council to work on those items? I don't know. I'm asking director.
That's a good question.
That's typical, but I honestly don't know enough. If these were suggested by the commission, I have worked places where the commission formulates suggestions that are then conveyed to the city council. That you either see these as high priority items and are then, I take that in a sense as like you're almost asking to be directed to look into these,
Yes.
is what it
Well,
seems
it
like.
could be taken that way, but item number 6 that Councilmember Haney gave us was, quote, design guidelines, especially for East Ojai Avenue, not covered by existing design guidelines.
Oh, no, and I think that's,
So I think
that's
we can
clear,
kind of
that
throw
was.
in there what we want to as we make recommendations.
I would say if you see something else like a sub-issue that falls under that, then I think that's fair game. So
Right.
if parking, for instance,
Right.
is an issue for that topic, then that's a piece of what you're discussing that
Included
night.
is-
Right,
as
I was
that
speaking
discussion.
more to like some of these more global things,
Right.
that if you
Right.
weren't directed,
Exactly, like the general plan,
General
affordable
plan,
housing.
affordable
things
housing.
like that, yeah.
Right,
Right.
I think the city council is already focused on general plan update, so we may not need to do anything
Right.
until they ask us our opinion on a certain aspect of it. Okay, planning commission liaison schedule. Commissioner Merck, a report
Yes,
on
sir.
the city council meeting from April 24th.
I was out of town on April 24th, so I did not attend the city council meeting. Everyone can watch the video if they need to know what went on.
Here, here.
And Commissioner Nolan, you're up next for city council,
Oh, yeah.
May 8th. Okay,
Next week.
you see the rest of the assignments. May 9th, Building Appeals Board. Oh, you get that one too.
I get a
Lucky
double-
you.
a double,
And April 23rd, the next MAC meeting. So we don't have any other reports at this point. We do have a report due at the next, 2 reports due at the next
The
meeting.
April 23rd meeting happened in April
Yes. Yes.
for Ray Powers to report tonight.
Right, but that was the meeting I emailed and said I
Oh, there
couldn't
it is,
make.
yes.
And someone else was gonna take it over. I don't know if they did. No one did. Oh.
On TV.
The MAC meets without us.
Cannot do that.
Oh, it's a MAC meeting.
In fact, at times it's hard to hear what's going on in the meeting. There's such enthusiasm in the room. Okay, well, I'll take the next one, May 21st, and report back at the appropriate time. Any other topics that we need to cover tonight?
Do you want the Complete Streets meeting?
Oh, yes, that's fine. Yes, oh, that's from this afternoon. I'm sorry to have missed it.
Oh, that's true. It'll just take a second. Let me grab my notes really quick. Well, we reported back that we had our Earth Day booth at Libby Park, which was successful. We didn't get as many people signing out our forms that we have with, input, but we had quite a few people coming in and asking and wanting to know what Complete Streets is, and a lot of people in support. Got a couple of new people that wanted to be on the emailing list, so all in all, a good day. The other thing was, thank you, Commissioner, or Chair Quillisi, for ordering the DMV vehicle and bicycle safety trip brochures. So we got 1,000 of those, and we handed quite a few out at Earth Day, and then we also started handing them out to local businesses. So we handed them out to the Mob Shop, to Boku, who's doing the electric bike rental, and then we plan to take them also to the local hotels that have bikes or bike rentals also.
Of which there are 5 in town,
Yeah.
where they have rental bicycles for their guests.
Exactly, and then also to the other bike shop. Yeah, or free. Some of them are. And then let me
Or
just
free.
see. Oh, we also had an ongoing list for future bike racks along the public right-of-way, which I did send to our Public Works Director. I think I had 22 locations on there that I had identified, so that went out. A couple things we kind of tabled. We had a little bit of a switch today. We happened to have a guest, Andy Cantwell, the superintendent for the Ojai Unified School District, and it was wonderful. So we kind of shifted over to safe routes to school, and he shared 4 things with us. Well, one of them was they're in need, they have a lack of crossing guards at a lot of important informations important intersections. And so this doesn't necessarily happen to tie into Complete Streets, but although we're there to support it, it looks like they may be collaborating and getting some funding through grants to actually get,
I heard about one private donation.
well, I heard about that too, and I'm not sure if that is gonna happen, but I did hear about that also. So anyway, that's very needed. And then, how does that tie into Complete Streets? Well, the more people we have walking, the less cars we have on the road too, which is a good thing. Less traffic, less vehicle miles traveled and less air pollutants. He also let us know that they just purchased 3 new buses, and this was through an EPA grant, and they figured out it'd be cost neutral. So what they're doing is, they're newer buses, so they're more energy efficient, number one. Apparently they're air conditioned. But they've worked out a lease program with Camp Ramah in the summer, which is great. So that'll be covering some of the costs between that and the grant. And the other thing that I thought was kind of unique and interesting that they're going to be doing is, or at least they're working on it, is rather than right now, a bus goes to a school and then it goes to bus stops within a certain neighborhood, but they're hoping to have the buses essentially have bus stops, almost like a city bus would have. So let's just say a bus might go from Matilaha to Nordoff, and then maybe Nordoff to Miramonte. But it's a way for students to maybe get...
Mixed load of passengers.
Yeah, you might get closer to home, and you might have to walk a little bit more, but they'd be touching different bus stop locations, meaning the bus stops would be at the different schools, rather than like a direct route into a neighborhood. So they think that'll manage the bus flow and the traffic and what have you better. So they're gonna be trying that, which I thought was interesting. And they did make a board decision last night to move the 6th graders to Matilaha starting in the fall of 2019. So there will be more students. They figured over a couple of years it wouldn't be significantly more than what they have right now. But nevertheless, there's still the issue at Matilaha Junior High with traffic congestion and what safety issues and what have you. And then the other one is they're interested in doing either a safe route to school day or week in October, which happens to be the national safe routes to school week or day. And they actually aligned with the County of Ventura, and Alta Planning is doing some work with them and a study about gathering data for complete streets. It happens to be at the schools within the school district that are outside of the city limit, but nevertheless, we've got people going in and out. And there's,
People are going in and out of the city limits
Exactly.
for that travel, yes.
And I believe don't quote me on this one, but I think he said, God, it was a third or more of the students. So you might live in the Miramonte area and your kids might go to San Antonio, so you're driving through town. So there's that cross-district option that they have. So anyway, he's willing to share that data, and we as Complete Streets have been very active in the safe routes to school movement to the degree that we can, but what I recommended was it'd be really nice to have the school district initiate and come to us and ask for help rather than us, going to them, which
Trying to
hasn't
push
been.
them into something,
Yeah, we get a little bit of interest, and everybody wants it to be safe for the kids, but we haven't had a lot of help from either the staff or the administration, teachers, or even say the parents or the students, although some of them do want it. So it's kind of a
Maybe the first
shift.
step would be to get Andy to nominate someone in the school administration to be liaison to the Complete Streets Committee.
As a matter of fact, that came up, and it looks like that's going to happen.
Great.
So anyway, all said and done, it was a very good meeting, and that's the bulk of it.
Terrific.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Regarding complete streets and the buses, did anyone mention about the possibility of putting bicycle racks on school buses? So if you do this new route and someone gets dropped off at Miramonte, but it's a longer walk home, they can grab their bike off the bus and ride it home?
We didn't say that, but that's an excellent idea, because I know we keep bringing that up with the public buses, hoping that there could be more racks. Oftentimes, you can only get 2 to 3 bikes on, and that limits it. So I will share that. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point.
Excellent. That ends the reports that we have for tonight. And in lieu of Councilmember Randy Haney, we have Councilmember Paul Blatz this evening to bring us some wisdom. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Congratulations, Chair Quillisi.
We'll see.
Nice to see you, Luke. Other members of the commission, and I can't help but think that every time I come here, I think about the 10 years that I spent on this commission. And Merck was with me the whole time, and then I was not on anything, and then I've been on the council for 8 years, so I have no idea. How many years has it been?
This is my 20th year.
Yeah, so
2 decades on the
I
bus.
knew it had to be,
Yeah.
somewhere up more than 18 years, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all those years. One thing, when you're looking at the possibility of more than one unit on a parcel, if you look at that map that the chair directed you to, you're going to see within the city limits there aren't very many large parcels. There's no ranches, no orchards. In fact, I don't think we have any caretaking cottages, even one on any parcel. There may be one on the one up on, as you're going around the corner on Grand by North Signal Street. That might have 2, but there's just hardly any
The old
anywhere
Rupp
where.
property, yeah.
What's that? Yeah. You just look at it, there's not very many large parcels within the city of Ojai. And we really do rely on you guys to delve into these things, and particularly the tiny home on wheels is a hot topic right now. And that's why we sent it back to you, to get your input. The things that we discussed were whether you're going to allow them on wheels, whether you have to have aprons, do you need a foundation, can they be self-sufficient, do you have to hook them up to public utilities? Are they going to be allowed in addition to an ADU that might be on there, or a second dwelling? How do you, they're built to a different standard. So all those things that we debated and discussed, we thought that it ought to come back to you guys to really,
Things that we've
What you
both
think of it?
struggled with already.
Mhm.
Yes.
and it's an interesting concept, and I don't know where it's going to go, to tell you the truth. It seems like it's something that we definitely have to look at, though.
Right.
For sure. The other thing is I think you mentioned, Chair Quillisi, that you can have, if you have a second dwelling unit, and maybe you can help me here, Sherry. If you have a second dwelling unit, can you add an accessory dwelling unit or an accessory unit? Or is it that if you have an accessory unit, you can't add an ADU? What is it? I mean, if you already have
If you already have a guest house. you
guest
can
house,
add
but
an
no
ADU.
kitchen, you can't have an ADU, right?
Right. You can have an
Can.
ADU,
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
If you already have a guest house, you can have an
but
ADU.
if you have an ADU, you can't add the guest house with
Gotcha.
no
Okay.
kitchen.
Well, that might be something to look at, I don't know.
There's no logic to that.
No.
No, well, other than the fact that the guest house doesn't help for affordable housing, because you can't live in it. Yeah. That's the only logic, but I don't see it. I mean, if somebody had a second dwelling unit on their property and wanted to build a pool house, I don't see why they couldn't do it. I mean, when you really look at
Well,
it.
there are also accessory buildings
Mhm.
that are neither guest houses nor ADUs.
Yeah.
And those are not regulated to the same extent.
Exactly. Those are just half baths. You can only have a bath and a toilet and a sink in them, and they will qualify
Right.
at this point, yeah.
So thank you for all your hard work. Have we interviewed for the replacement? Do you know? Have you, has the chair been involved in any? John? No?
Okay.
Okay.
I remember when I interviewed, it was the mayor, another city council member, and the chair of the commission.
Right.
So unless that
Don't know.
process has
Have we been,
changed.
do you know if there's applications or anything, Sherry?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll try to get that filled as soon as we can. It's nice to have a full commission. Any questions for me? No? Well, I'm happy to be here in place of Haney. He went down to the SCAG
Better
annual
him than us.
meeting in
Yeah.
Palm Springs. So as I was coming back from court this afternoon, he called me and said, "Can I come tonight?" So fortunately, I was able to. This quarter, I'm the liaison to the Park and Recreations, so I'll be here tomorrow night as well.
Okay.
But anyway, thank you very much for all your efforts. This commission, unlike the others, you meet twice a month. It's a lot of hard work, very important deliberations you have to make, so I really do appreciate it, as we all do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so
Hit that
Prep.
gavel.
prep for May 16th. You can find, well, it'll be in the packet as well, but you might want to start on it a little earlier. The proposed ordinance that was before the city council and is now being returned to us is Title 10, 10-2.1709L. It's a new subparagraph to 1709, which is the ADU section of the code. But go back, you can go online, find that as part of the packet under that discussion item for either the last city council meeting or the one before that, I think. And read through that and start to think about what you might want to do in terms of recommending go as it is or do something different or shoot it in the head or whatever your opinion is. And then we'll discuss that at the next meeting. And there being no other business before the commission, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.